In the dark shadow of World War II, few events capture the unimaginable horror of the Holocaust like what happened at Babi Yar. In late September 1941, just outside Kyiv, Ukraine, Nazi death squads orchestrated one of the largest single massacres of Jews during the entire Holocaust. In just 2 days, nearly 34,000 people were methodically slaughtered and buried in a ravine. There were no gas chambers, no deportation trains, only bullets, screams, and silence. This massacre wasn't just mass murder, it was a performance of calculated brutality. The victims were Kyiv's Jewish population, mothers, fathers, children, stripped of their dignity, possessions, and ultimately their lives. Babi Yar became a symbol of what historians now call the Holocaust by bullets, a grim prelude to the mechanized genocide that followed. Understanding Babi Yar isn't for the faint-hearted. It requires confronting humanity's capacity for cruelty head-on. Before the Nazis arrived, Kyiv was home to a vibrant Jewish community of nearly 160,000 people, a third of the city's population. Generations of Jewish families had lived, prayed, and worked in Kyiv, contributing to its culture, economy, and identity. But everything changed in June 1941, when Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the massive invasion of the Soviet Union. By September, the Germans had captured Kyiv. Almost immediately, anti-Jewish laws and violence followed. The city was reeling not only from occupation, but from widespread suspicion and propaganda. The Nazis blamed the recent explosions that damaged German installations on the city's Jews, a fabricated excuse that set the stage for annihilation. The Nazi death squads, known as Einsatzgruppen, arrived with a clear mission: eliminate all undesirables. Jews, Roma, Soviet political commissars, no one was safe. In Kyiv, the ravine called Babi Yar would become the site of one of their most monstrous acts. On September 28, 1941, flyers appeared across Kyiv. The message was chillingly mundane. All Jews living in the city must report by 8 a.m. on Monday, September 29th, at the corner of Melnikova and Doktorivska streets near the cemetery. They were told to bring documents, money, valuables, and warm clothing. The implication was relocation, not extermination. Tens of thousands obeyed. Families packed what they could. Some wore their best clothes, hoping to maintain dignity. Few suspected they were walking toward their deaths. What followed over the next 2 days was one of the most systematic executions in history. Under the direction of Nazi officers and with assistance from local collaborators, over 33,771 Jewish men, women, and children were marched to Babi Yar, a deep ravine just outside the city. There, victims were forced to strip naked, surrender their belongings, and lie down in layers across the bodies of those already murdered. Then the shooting began. The executions were carried out by Einsatzgruppe C, aided by units of the SS, German police, and Ukrainian auxiliaries. Machine guns roared from the ravine's edge. The killers worked in shifts. When one grew tired, another took his place. The cries of children were muffled by the dirt and the bodies piling up. Eyewitnesses spoke of the horror in whispers. Dina Pranicheva, one of the few known survivors, feigned death after falling into the pit, buried beneath corpses. She later described the blood, the suffocation, the dead eyes of infants lying beside their mothers. By the end of September 30, the ground at Babi Yar wasn't just soaked in blood, it had become a mass grave for nearly an entire population. This was not done in secrecy. Locals heard the gunfire. The smoke rose for days. Babi Yar was not just a site of death, it was a warning, left in plain sight, of how deeply hate could take root and how quickly it could be acted upon. The horror of Babi Yar did not end with the massacre of September 29-30. Over the next 2 years, the ravine became a killing ground for tens of thousands more. Jews were only the first victims. The Nazis turned Babi Yar into a site of ongoing extermination, a grotesque conveyor belt of death. Roma families, Soviet prisoners of war, Ukrainian nationalists, psychiatric patients from local hospitals, and political dissidents were all brought to the ravine. They were marched to the same edge, shot with the same cold precision, and buried in the same ever-growing pit. The ravine became a symbol of what historians call the Holocaust by bullets, a stage of the genocide where murder was done face to face, one bullet at a time. Estimates suggest that between 100,000 and 150,000 people were killed at Babi Yar by the time the Nazis retreated in 1943. It became one of the largest mass graves in Europe. As Soviet forces advanced, the Nazis began erasing their crimes. In August 1943, they forced Jewish prisoners to exhume the bodies, burn them on massive pyres made from tombstones and timber, and grind the bones into ash. These prisoners, knowing they were next, staged a desperate escape. 15 survived to tell the world what had happened. The Holocaust at Babi Yar was not just murder, it was annihilation, cover-up, and denial wrapped into one. It remains a stark reminder that genocide doesn't begin with gas chambers. It begins with silence and ends with bullets. When Soviet forces recaptured Kyiv in November 1943, they uncovered the ruins of Babi Yar, scorched earth, bone fragments, and the faint stench of atrocity. The sheer scale of the crime was undeniable. In 1946, Nazi perpetrators like Pavel Blobel, who orchestrated the massacre, were tried and sentenced. But justice was partial and slow. What followed was perhaps more disturbing: silence. During the Soviet era, Babi Yar became a place not of remembrance, but of erasure. The USSR refused to acknowledge the specifically Jewish nature of the victims. Official narratives referred only to Soviet citizens or victims of fascism. The ravine was filled with waste. No monument marked the site for decades. It wasn't until 1961 that poet Yevgeny Yevtushenko broke the silence with his haunting poem, Babi Yar, declaring, "There are no monuments over Babi Yar." His words, and Shostakovich's Symphony No. 13 inspired by them, reignited public awareness, but state recognition remained elusive. This suppression wasn't just political, it was psychological, an attempt to bury the horror under layers of nationalism and ideological conformity. But truth, like the cries from that ravine, could not be silenced forever. The long overdue process of memorializing Babi Yar began slowly, against resistance and denial. In 1976, the first official monument was erected, but it made no mention of Jews. Instead, it honored Soviet citizens and prisoners of war, sidestepping the central truth of the massacre. Only after Ukraine gained independence in 1991 did true acknowledgement begin. That same year, a menorah-shaped monument was unveiled at the site to explicitly honor the Jewish victims. More followed. Memorials to Roma victims, murdered children, and other persecuted groups gradually transformed Babi Yar into a multifaceted site of mourning. Efforts to create a comprehensive memorial intensified in the 21st century. In 2016, the Babi Yar Holocaust Memorial Center was founded, a major international initiative to document, preserve, and educate. The project seeks not just to build monuments, but to create an immersive experience honoring every victim. It aims to open fully by 2026. However, history continues to haunt the site. In 2022, during Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a missile struck near Babi Yar, causing casualties and sparking global outrage. The memory of past violence collided with present conflict, reinforcing the urgency of remembrance and the peril of forgetting. Babi Yar is not just a historical scar. It's a wound that artists, writers, and survivors have tried to process for generations. Yevgeny Yevtushenko's 1961 poem gave voice to millions silenced by fear, while Shostakovich's Symphony No. 13 turned grief into symphonic rebellion. These works didn't just reflect horror, they condemned the silence that followed it. Literature, music, and film have since grappled with Babi Yar's legacy. Documentaries like Babi Yar context-use archival footage and testimonies to reconstruct the massacre in chilling detail. Survivors' stories, raw, unfiltered, form the emotional core of these works, reminding us that statistics are never just numbers. They are names, faces, and future stolen. Today, Babi Yar continues to echo. The missile strike during Russia's 2022 invasion shattered more than buildings, it threatened memory itself. The site, meant to honor the dead, was endangered once again by war and aggression. In a world still plagued by genocide, racism, and historical revisionism, Babi Yar stands as a brutal monument to where hatred leads. Art, memory, and testimony are its guardians. Confronting such pain isn't easy, but it's necessary if we hope to keep history from repeating itself. Babi Yar is more than a ravine. It's a graveyard without headstones, a silence that screams through time. What happened there was not an accident of war. It was intentional, organized, and executed with terrifying precision. The victims were not just lost, they were erased, and for decades, the world looked away. Today, remembering Babi Yar is not just an act of mourning, it is a moral obligation. It forces us to ask, how do we ensure that the ground we walk on never again becomes the ground where others fall, forgotten, unnamed, and unheard?